So the official welcome will be spoken by Piet Mum, the chair of German-Belarusian Society. I just wanted to introduce us because it's very seldom that the three chairs of our society are appearing together. So the chair, the vice chair, and I'm the treasurer, and I give the word to Piet Mum.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Piet Mum. I'm the chairman of the German-Belarusian Society, and I have the pleasure to welcome you all this morning here in the House of Democracy and Human Rights in Berlin. The Minsk Forum 2024 is taking place in yet another somewhat more frugal format this year, which comes due to the challenging environment in which we had to compete for funding this year. We are quite proud that we have been able to organize a small conference nonetheless, which is to a great extent thanks to the tireless work that Peter Liesegang has put in, and also the generous support of the GMF. We've had a successful start yesterday already with the Klausur, as we call it, the closed session, which took place. And I hope that we will be able to continue in the spirit. An old blessing says, may you live in boring times. It seems that we are not so fortunate, but this should give us plenty of topics to talk about. And I'm hoping for a lot of fruitful discussions, useful insights. And without further ado, let's get this underway. And I'd like to hand over to Fred for his opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pete, for your introducing words. Good morning to everybody. I'm very proud and happy and glad that I have the possibility to talk to you to this 22nd Minsk Forum with raising the voice of Belarus all over in Europe. This, I think, it is a very, very important issue we have to do, and it is the task of our association, DBG, to give you the possibility to raise your voice. And what I'm going to tell you just now is my point of view of that as vice chairman of this association, and to encourage you and to give you some hints and some thoughts I have had by myself, preparing myself for this speech. Well, I haven't known before a week ago that I was about to tell to you what it will be today our issue. So anyway, I want to tell you first a little bit about my personal background, why I am member of this association, and why I think it is very, very important that Belarusian voice should be more raised in Germany and in Europe as well. So I want to start with a personal view on Belarus before the collapse of the Soviet Union, before the Republic of Belarus was founded, before the political power was taken by Lukashenko, and I will end with a perspective on German-Belarusian relations beyond this political regime. For me, born still in wartime, as for many people in Germany, Belarus, Weißrussland as it was called, has been for a long time an almost unknown country, somewhere in Eastern Europe, part of the then still existing Soviet Union. It became interesting in the times of peace movement in the Federal Republic of Germany in the 80s of the last century, when General Secretary Gorbachev had proclaimed glasnost and perestroika. The Iron Curtain started to fall, and as well when the memories of the Second World War, then about more than 40 years ago, became more and more vivid and present, especially from the perspective of the churches. There was a deep desire for reconciliation and with the peoples of the Soviet Union, thus to overcome still existing hostilities between the former enemies. I participated in a public discussion, a forum organized by an academy of the Protestant Church on questions how to prevent atomic war, how to come to peaceful relationships with the still existing Soviet Union. It was about the special German responsibility, the crimes the German army, the Wehrmacht, had committed in the eastern part of Europe and especially in Poland, Belarus, and Ukraine. On the podium sat a former officer of the Wehrmacht, talked about his time as a soldier in Belarus, and cried. He wept. It had taken him more than 40 years, so he said, to realize, to understand that there was no ordinary warfare possible in that war German troops had brought to the Soviet Union. He was part of these incredible crimes, though he hadn't committed them, but he had made them happen, made them possible. He had come to this insight through a visit of XXII, the memorial for all people who had been killed in Belarus during wartime, round about 1/4 of the then existing population. He was touched by the intensity of this memorial and especially by the message of the victims of XXII and all other people that were killed in Belarus. Dear fellow human beings, remember, we loved life and our homeland and you. We were burnt alive. Our request to everyone, may grief and suffering give you strength and courage so that you can bring peace on earth forever, so that life never dies in the storm of fire. So this witness of World War II, a former officer of the Wehrmacht, was so touched by this message that he cried. And so was I when I visited this place some years later in 1988, together with a group of Germans on a so-called political pilgrimage, Return to the Future, Pavarot k budущему. I understood that it was our task to take the responsibility for the consequences of these crimes committed by Germans in that war of annihilation, that it was up to us to ask for reconciliation, to be considered as fellow human beings with a wish to be accepted as good neighbors, and that this will be an everlasting task, as it is asked for in the message of XXII. This political pilgrimage had an important impact, and so we organized a second one 1 year later with 70 participants. And here, for the first time after the reactor explosion of Chernobyl in 1986, in Belarus our partners confessed to us openly that they could not manage the obviously horrible consequences of this catastrophe. And so, a huge readiness emerged to help our newfound partners and friends to cope with all the troubles, arising more and more after the unprecedented incident. At this time, the Soviet Union collapsed. The Iron Curtain had definitely fallen. It was the time when Belarus made its first steps to democracy. So a lot of projects were started to help the children suffering from the Chernobyl catastrophe, to help the people, to help the country. For these efforts, I just name one project I have been involved in from the very beginning, the project Nadezhda, a children's and youth convalescent home for children out of regions in Belarus poisoned by nuclear radiation. It's been a common project on bilateral, equally shared responsibility by the Belarusian authorities and by Belarusian and German civil organizations. Since that time, 1994, thousands of children of the Gomel region received recovery, mental and health care. It became possible by the active engagement of people from either side, trustfully, cooperatively, efficiently. This filling the wish for reconciliation with life. This bilateral project has just now come to an end by the simple reason that the Belarusian authorities abandoned the principle of equal partnership and insisted on taking over control by getting the majority of decision-making. This is only one example of hundreds of NGOs, partnerships, and cooperative activities between Germany and Belarus that more and more have been impeded, closed, prohibited, even prosecuted by the Belarusian authorities. But how could it happen that all the engagement for better relationships, good neighborhood, trustful partnership, all the readiness for taking responsibility for the consequences of the sufferance of Belarusian population during wartime and after Chernobyl were refused, even expelled? Of course, there are many internal reasons for this current crisis caused by the character, the Lukashenko regime, and the role Russia plays in this region. However, there are also reasons in Western politics and behavior that may be considered as failing, such as frequent portrayal of the West as the victor of the Cold War, the eastern enlargement of the EU provoked new exclusion for Belarus, Russia, Ukraine. Western states proclaimed humanitarian interventions and thus justified the necessary breaches of international law. So the reproach of double standards in Western politics cannot be ignored. Western politics have to be much more coherent if they are expected to be recognized, accepted, successful. The idea, however, the wish for reconciliation, or a little bit more modest, the wish for understanding and coming to terms has to be newly understood and tried. So the situation we are confronted with is by no means a reason to give up. Our responsibility is not a commitment depending on the conditions of Belarusian authorities, nor has it come to an end by the failure of Western politics. It has its own reason. It is the expression of the deep wish to establish in common interest friendly and peaceful neighborhood and trustful cooperation. But of course, the situation has totally changed. It is not anymore us who go to Belarus to offer help, to give good advice, to establish new forms of cooperation. This might have been considered at times even as humiliating, patronizing. So maybe there was not enough understanding of the situation of the Belarusian people, their history, their culture. But for sure, these were not the reasons why many inhabitants have left their country for good, looking for better living conditions in other countries. Since 2017, there has been a continuous decline of the Belarusian population from approximately 9,500,000 to 9,250,000 in 2022, and most of them after August 2020. They fled to countries like Poland, Lithuania, Georgia, and Germany. And here, as I see it, there's a good chance to fulfill the commitment given in our renewed constitution of the DBG with new life. The aim of promotion of international spirit, tolerance in all areas of culture, and the idea of international understanding in accordance with the human rights standards as set out in the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union and the Charter of the United Nations is a commitment for all of us to consider the increased number of people in Germany with Belarusian origin, now approximately about 45,000 to 50,000 people, as a chance to foster and to develop new activities and projects So, for instance, organizing cultural projects with Belarusian authors, artists, and musicians living in Germany, support of Belarusian refugees in all questions of integration, support of organizations working in favor of the protection of people imprisoned in Belarus, demand for coherent policy towards autocratic regimes, enhancing online projects in Belarus, reduced working on projects existing and already working for several years in Belarus with the hope for reactivation in future as a kind of survival strategy. Thus, we may find a suitable way to fulfill the task of our Constitution, to hold on our responsibility and to keep in mind the memorial of XXII. This, of course, is a huge challenge for our very, very small organization, but maybe our forum today may give a start to new common activities, to establish new and more connections, to build networks, to plan new projects, to discover the richness of Belarusian culture, to develop new terms of trustful neighborhood in our country, in Europe. This is what I wish very deeply, and I thank you for your attention. Have a good day.
Very nice way of moving the... I wanted to take this opportunity to remember a person who had a lot of hobbies, who had a lot of positions, and in the end, one of his hobbies was Belarus. Hans-Georg Wieck died this year. I think he got 94, 95. 95. And I had the great luck to, first of all, know him, and secondly, share in a few projects of his. What is very little known is that after his position at OSCE in Minsk, he founded an NGO trying to deal with the disappeared cases from 99-2000. I am also a member of that NGO, and the attempt was to find a legal basis to put Lukashenko before court in Germany. This went quite far, but in the end it wasn't successful. So in order to remember Hans-Georg Wieck, I wanted to just in 3 minutes ride through the regime development of the last 25 years, including the role that Hans-Georg Wieck played. So it starts 94, everybody knows he was elected. 96, 97 probably are the first moments when he began to turn back. As a result, not only Wiesna 96 and Chata 97 were founded, but also OSCE installed in 98 the first advisory and monitoring group in Minsk, which was rather independent, too independent in the end for Lukashenko, which was headed by Hans-Georg Wieck. That's when I got to know him in that time. In 99, there were supposed to be elections, they were skipped. Opposition tried to organize their own election. As a result, or within this process, 4 people disappeared, who are disappeared until today. In 2001, Mr. Wieck got very active trying to bring together opposition figures so that they would cooperate, which in the eyes of Lukashenko made Wieck dangerous. 2001, the first falsified elections. I put as a date 2004. I don't know how many of you know Directiva Nummer Adin. If you don't, it's worth reading. In my eyes, this is the moment when the regime got solid and when they put into words that the boss is the boss and there's nobody else. That was 2000. Then we had the high-profile cases. We had Directiva Nummer Adin, and then we had further elections. 2004, of course, was also parliamentary and constitutional. In 2004, the Council of Europe released the Purgaridis report, which I will come back to later, which named 4 people as being responsible for the disappeared cases. In the same year, as a reaction, Hans-Georg Wieck founds the NGO Human Rights for Belarus here in Berlin, the one I talked about, who was trying to get him before court. And again, 2006 mass protest elections, it goes on. And in 2010, then the period after 2010 was rather quiet because the repressions were so high and nobody was trying to protest. 2017, in my eyes, is the beginning of the movement that led to 2020, when there were again some protests, which continued, and then you have Corona, self-organization, society finding out that they have power, and then we know what happened. And then we know that summer 2020, fall, everything exploded, but didn't explode enough. Or let's say the other side didn't implode. And the next slide is, this is the binding element that I want to use. In 2020, all of a sudden, Mr. Pavlichenko appeared publicly again. And Pavlichenko was one of the 4 named by Council of Europe, and the Council of Europe actually released a statement. And this I wanted to show. I'm not claiming that this is official Council of Europe stuff, although somebody put the symbol down there. This was the resolution, or part of the resolution, and these are the 4 people that were found responsible for the disappeared cases. And if I take one binding characteristic in all this story, it's basically Pavlichenko. If that is the face of the regime, or the face behind the regime, then we know what we are dealing with. The next one is, I think, again, the welcoming address. And this should a little bit already lead into the first panel. Just one remark for us. You see on the roll-ups and on that one that deutsch-belarussische is still written with 2 S. Officially, that has already changed. Officially, our name is with 1 S by now, but we haven't changed these yet. We might do it for next year. So then I thank all of you